They call this the Emerald Isle. A small island facing the full force of the Atlantic, where weather shifts so quickly that a single afternoon can feel like several seasons passing. Around the world, more than 70 million people claim this place as their origin. But only about 5 million people live on this island. That means most of Ireland exists somewhere else. This land stayed. Its people learned how to leave. How does a place so deeply loved become a place so often departed? Ireland today is home to just over 5 million people, yet far beyond the edge of this island, tens of millions around the world trace their roots back here. Their families left across generations, carried by hunger, by hardship, or by the simple lack of choice. Ireland did not send its culture outward by design. It spread because people had to leave. Names crossed oceans, accents softened, but memory stayed close. What began as loss slowly became one of the most far-reaching cultural legacies of the modern world. For centuries, the direction of this island was shaped elsewhere. Rule from Britain left its mark on the land, the language, and the limits of everyday life. Resistance grew over time, sometimes quietly, sometimes violently. Independence eventually came, followed almost immediately by civil war. The island was divided, not only by borders, but by identity, into the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Even after the Good Friday Agreement brought an end to large-scale violence, history did not disappear. It remained present, woven into daily life, rather than resolved. By the late 20th century, Ireland began to change once more. Long associated with poverty and emigration, it entered a period of rapid economic growth. As investment arrived and technology companies followed, fields gave way to offices, gaining the country a new reputation. Today, many multinational corporations operate their European headquarters here, and the country is often described as exceptionally wealthy. But that picture is incomplete. Much of this prosperity exists on paper, moving through the island rather than settling into it. The numbers are real, but their meaning is less clear, and beneath the statistics, a quieter question remains. How does a place shaped by departure, division, and endurance measure success when not all forms of wealth are meant to stay? Giant's Causeway. At first glance, the pattern does not feel natural. Stone rises from the ground in repeating forms, each column locking into the next, with a precision that feels deliberate. The shapes are consistent and the edges sharp, with spacing regular enough to suggest planning. These columns formed when lava cooled and contracted, breaking along lines of stress. Over time, the process repeated itself again and again, producing thousands of six-sided structures packed tightly together. Thousands of six-sided structures formed naturally, shaped by neither tools nor hands. This stretch of coast is known today as Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. Long before scientific explanations existed, people living nearby searched for a different kind of understanding. They told stories of a giant capable of shaping stone, with strength alone. The legend did not emerge from imagination for entertainment. Standing here, scale becomes difficult to measure. The columns extend toward the water, uneven and exposed. Wind moves steadily across the surface. Waves strike the rock without pause. After time spent here, attention shifts naturally away from the stone and toward the coastline beyond, where land meets water under constant pressure. Stone walls rise directly from the edge of the cliff, leaving no space between structure and drop. The position feels intentional, where height offers control and exposure provides warning. From here, movement along the coast could be seen long before it arrived. For centuries, this was considered security. This is Dunluce Castle, built to dominate both land and water. Its location suggested strength, but it also surrendered the building to constant pressure. Wind moves through the ruins without obstruction. Salt air settles into the stone. The ground beneath shows no interest in stability. At its height, the castle was a seat of power. Control extended outward from these walls through land ownership, labor, and allegiance. But the structure itself depended on conditions it could not manage. Storms reached it without resistance. Erosion worked slowly, without pause. A story remains from that time. During a night of severe weather, part of the kitchen collapsed into the sea below. The servants inside did not survive. The rest of the castle remained standing. The event is often described as a natural disaster, an accident caused by wind and rain. But the location of the collapse invites another reading. The space that failed first was not a hall of authority or a private chamber. It was a working space. The people lost were not decision-makers. Today, only fragments remain. Walls break off without warning. Floors end abruptly. There is no clear boundary between what once stood and what has already fallen. Walking through the city, nothing immediately looks unusual. Cars pass, shops open, people go about their day, but after a while, patterns begin to appear. While certain streets feel busier, others remain quiet. Some routes are frequently used, while others are avoided without explanation. This is Belfast, a city shaped by division for much of the 20th century. For decades, violence and political conflict influenced where people lived, which neighborhoods they belonged to, and how safe it felt to cross from one area to another. These boundaries were not always marked on maps, but everyone knew where they were. When the conflict known as the Troubles came to an end, life here began to change. Bombings stopped. Military checkpoints disappeared. New buildings rose and tourism returned, bringing life back to cafes, music venues, and businesses. The city looked forward, but the walls remained. Concrete barriers still separate some neighborhoods. They are called peace walls. They were built to prevent violence, and in many places, they are still considered necessary. Gates along these walls close at night. During the day, people pass through them as part of their routine. The structures are no longer dramatic. They are normal. Along these walls, stories are written openly. Murals cover large sections of brick and concrete. They show faces, slogans, historical events, and symbols. Many people who grew up here learned these divisions without being formally taught. Children noticed which streets their families used and which they did not. They learned where they were welcome and where they were not. Belfast is now known for its creativity, its music, and its energy. At the same time, it still carries the structures built during conflict. Peace exists here, but it exists alongside walls, gates, and memories that have not been removed. The road narrows as traffic thins. Houses grow farther apart. Fields remain open longer than expected. In this part of the country, daily life has not been reorganized for visitors. Shops close early. Conversations continue in a language that did not disappear, because it never fully left. This is Donegal, where Irish Gaelic is still spoken at home, not preserved for performance. It is heard in passing remarks, in local radio, in places where translation is not offered. Beyond the last clusters of buildings, the land rises sharply, Footpaths fade into grass and stone. The cliffs ahead belong to Slieve League, among the highest sea cliffs in Europe, rising more than 1,900 feet above the Atlantic. Here, the absence of barriers is deliberate. The ground does not guide movement. A narrow ridge runs along the cliff face. Locals refer to it as one man's path. Locals refer to it as one man's path, a name that is purely descriptive. The route allows space for only one person at a time. There is no margin for distraction, not whether the view is worth it, but whether judgment can be trusted. Scattered across the surrounding hills are traces of earlier use, stone circles, standing markers, remains of gathering places, with no written record explaining their purpose. These sites suggest that long before paths existed, people came here deliberately. The land served as a place of meaning, not shelter. There was no separation between daily life and belief. People who live nearby understand this. They speak plainly about the cliffs. They do not describe them as dangerous or safe. They describe them as they are. After time spent along the edge, attention shifts inward. Movement slows. The body adjusts. The land does not demand bravery. It demands accuracy. Sheep are everywhere here. They move across open ground without fences, stepping onto roads, resting near footpaths, and standing close to the cliff edge without hesitation. They are not guided or contained. Their presence is ordinary. In this landscape, even livestock follows its own rules, shaped by familiarity rather than control. Glenveigh National Park. This landscape is part of Glenveigh National Park, a protected area shaped by mountains, lakes, and long stretches of quiet ground. The paths are maintained but lightly. The space does not feel arranged. Wildlife returns easily here. Deer move through the trees without urgency, and birds settle wherever they choose. One species, absent for more than a century, has come back on its own terms. The white-tailed eagle now circles above the park again, following routes remembered rather than taught. Its return is often described as recovery, and in ecological terms, that is accurate. But the land remembers more than animals. Beyond the trees and water, traces of earlier settlement remain faint or missing altogether. Entire communities once lived in nearby valleys and hills, relying on the same land for survival. Many left during periods of hunger and economic collapse. Their departure was sudden and final. Unlike wildlife, they did not return when conditions improved. The stillness encourages that. The place offers rest, but not answers. It allows recovery while quietly reminding those who pass through that not everything lost is meant to come back. The land changes again as the road enters a wide open region shaped by weather more than planning. Hills rise without pattern. Stone walls cut across fields, then stop without explanation. Light shifts quickly here. Clouds move low and fast, altering color and distance within minutes. This is Connemara, an area long known for isolation and exposure. Farming has always been difficult. Soil is thin. Wind is constant. Many who lived on this land left when survival became uncertain. Those who remained adapted to what the terrain allowed. A long lake stretches through the valley, its surface often still, reflecting the hills without distortion. At its edge stands a large stone structure that feels unexpected in this setting. This is Kylemore Abbey. It was built in the 19th century as a private residence, commissioned by Mitchell Henry for his wife, Margaret. The project required years of labor and materials brought in from elsewhere. The intention was straightforward. It was meant to be a family home. Margaret died shortly after the house was completed. She did not have the chance to live there. After her death, the building lost its original purpose. Henry eventually left, and the estate passed through different hands before becoming a religious institution. The structure remained, but its role changed. The abbey is often described as romantic. The description fits visually, but it avoids the reason the place feels heavy. The structure exists because of love, but it survived because of absence. Inside the grounds, order replaces wildness. Paths are controlled, gardens are maintained. The surrounding hills remain unchanged. Visitors move quietly here. They walk the perimeter of the lake, pause in front of the stone facade, and continue without lingering too long. Life in Galway announces itself quickly. Music spills out onto the street without being invited. A fiddle starts near a corner, soon followed by a guitar. Voices gather around it, not as an audience, but as participants. No stage is required, and no schedule is kept. This is a city where music has never belonged only to performance. It exists in daily movement. In pubs, People do not come to watch. They come to sit, to listen, and eventually to join. Songs pass between tables without introduction. Lyrics are known even when the names of the singers are not. Galway's reputation as a cultural centre is recent. The habit behind it is not. For generations, music here carried more than entertainment. It carried language, memory, and connection at times when other forms of expression were restricted or lost. Along the waterfront at Salt Hill, a small habit continues without announcement. People walk to the end of the promenade and, almost without slowing down, swing a foot out to kick a stone set into the wall. At the end of the Salt Hill Promenade, people walk to the wall and kick a stone set into it. There is no sign, no explanation. If you see someone do it, don't stop or ask why. Just do the same. Everyone does. The ground changes first. Soil thins, then disappears. Stone takes over completely. The surface is uneven, broken into slabs and fissures that run without pattern. This landscape is known as the Burren. It is made almost entirely of exposed limestone, shaped by water over thousands of years. Rain drains quickly through cracks, leaving a surface that appears empty from a distance, yet is teeming with life up close. Plants grow here that should not share the same space. Species associated with the northern climates appear beside those more commonly found around the Mediterranean. They survive in the gaps between stone, protected from wind and temperature shifts by the rock itself. The conditions are narrow, but they are enough. Human presence here is older than it looks. Stone tombs and burial sites dating back more than 5,000 years sit among the rock. They were built deliberately, placed where the ground offered no obvious advantage. The land does not explain why they stayed. It only shows that they did. As the route continues south, the ground holds together longer before breaking off completely. The limestone ends abruptly. The Atlantic takes over. The edge is defined by cliffs of mohair rising more than 700 feet above the water. The scale is immediate. There are designated paths, but the distance between safety and exposure is short. Wind moves freely across the face of the cliffs. Sound carries upward from the ocean without interruption. Below, the water moves continuously against the rock. It has done so long before paths existed and will continue without reference to them. Stories speak of settlements lost to the sea, of land that once extended farther outward. There is no proof that survives clearly enough to confirm them. What remains visible is the edge itself. a boundary that has shifted slowly over time, taking with it whatever stood too close. How much was lost is impossible to measure. As the journey continues, the terrain softens again. Islands begin to appear offshore, shaped by similar forces, but carrying a different response. Off the coast, the land breaks apart into smaller forms. Stone replaces soil almost entirely. Wind reaches the ground without obstruction. Fresh water is limited. Nothing here suggests ease. For generations, the islands around offered little that could be taken for granted. Farming was not possible in any conventional sense. Instead, people created their own ground. Stone was cleared by hand, stacked into walls, and layered with sand and seaweed brought up from the shore. Over time, this mixture held just enough moisture to support crops. Every field was made, not found. The walls that divide the land serve more than one purpose. They keep animals contained. Mark ownership and reduce the force of wind. They also hold the ground in place. Without them, the thin soil would disappear. These structures are not decorative. They exist to prevent loss. Staying meant isolation, limited opportunity, and economic uncertainty. Leaving offered work and stability elsewhere, but often at a cost. As language faded and customs weakened, returning became less likely with each generation. Irish Gaelic is still spoken here, not as revival, but as continuity. It survives because people remained long enough to pass it on. That decision carried consequences. Families accepted fewer options in order to keep something intact. People who live here measure distance differently. The mainland is close enough to see, yet far enough to change everything. Boats run regularly. Weather decides when they stop. The choice to stay has never been simple. It still is not. Roads curve tightly along the coast. Fields break into smaller plots. Houses cluster close together, then disappear. This is the Dingle Peninsula, a region where Irish Gaelic remained part of daily life long after it faded elsewhere. Stone structures appear along the headlands at Slee Head. Some date back more than 1,000 years. The beehive huts were built without mortar, stacked carefully to withstand wind and rain. The nearby town of Dingle feels different. Streets are narrow but active. Shops, pubs, and fishing boats share the same space. The town is often described as welcoming, even playful. That reputation hides what lies just offshore. Beyond the horizon sit the Blasket Islands. For generations, small communities lived there year-round. They fished, farmed, raised families, and wrote extensively about their lives in Irish. Their isolation preserved language and tradition with unusual clarity. By the mid-20th century, conditions worsened. Storms limited access. Medical care was unreliable. Schools closed. Eventually, a decision was made. The remaining residents were relocated to the mainland. Declared unviable, the islands saw support end and their communities dissolve. A culture did not fade naturally. It was administratively closed. Houses were left behind. Fields returned to grass. The language left with the last boats. Around the same time, a dolphin known as fungi appeared regularly in Dingle Harbour. The animal became a symbol of friendliness and continuity. Boats followed it daily. Children grew up knowing it as part of the town. Today, the peninsula continues to attract attention for its beauty and character. The islands remain empty. The huts stand intact. The drive along the Ring of Kerry begins simply, following a road that respects the water and slope rather than cutting through them. Towns cluster briefly before yielding to long stretches of fields and light that shifts across the hills, forcing travelers to slow down as the landscape dictates the pace. This route flows naturally into Killarney National Park, where the convergence of lakes, ancient woodlands, and mountains creates a scenery so commanding that it often hides the complex history woven into the terrain. Within this setting, the Great Estates reveal how land ownership once defined the structure of daily life. Muckross House stands as the defining image of this era. Its deliberate grandeur and manicured grounds commanding admiration while representing a time when land ensured security for the few and uncertainty for the many. The polished stone and formal rooms survive as a pristine heritage site, preserving the finished picture of wealth, while the labor that sustained it remains a silent, invisible foundation. As the route tightens into the steep corridors of the Gap of Dunloe, the scale of the rock walls naturally evokes legends of giants. Yet, a different force carved the human history here, powers of law, rent, and inheritance that determined who held the ground and who was forced to abandon it. These pressures rippled outward, transforming this stunning geography into a point of departure for families scattering toward towns, ports, and foreign shores. Today, travelers move freely across boundaries that once rigidly separated status, enjoying the beauty of a landscape that serves as both a natural wonder and a record of distribution. The surviving houses and roads tell the story of those who remained, while the open path now leads toward the shoreline, where the narrative shifts to the millions for whom leaving became the only choice. The approach to Cove follows the curve of the harbour, where the town rises in layers from the waterline, each row of houses facing outward toward the channel. Streets descend gently toward the docks, shaped by generations of movement toward the same edge. The harbour sets the orientation here, drawing attention away from the land and toward the sea. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, this shoreline received a steady flow of people arriving from inland counties. They came from farms that no longer supported families, from villages reduced by hunger and eviction, from places where the future had narrowed into a single direction. Travel ended here. What followed depended on tides, schedules, and ships bound for destinations most passengers had never seen. Goodbyes happened quickly, often without ceremony, as space and time were limited. For many, this was the final moment spent on Irish ground. The harbour absorbed those moments repeatedly, season after season, as routes extended outward across the Atlantic. One ship connected this port to global memory more clearly than others. In 1912, the Titanic made its final stop here, collecting passengers already shaped by earlier departures. The event fits naturally into the harbour's history, not as an exception, but as part of a longer pattern in which leaving defined the relationship between Ireland and the wider world. Across the water, Spike Island remains in view, its profile fixed within the harbour. Over time, it functioned as a fort, a holding place, and later a prison, adapting to shifts in authority and control. Movement shaped everything here. Paths led toward the quay. Roads ended at the docks. Lives passed through in numbers too large to remember individually, yet consistent enough to change the population of entire regions. Today, the harbor continues to face outward. Visitors move along the waterfront, following the same streets, standing in the same spaces once crowded with waiting families. The water remains active, and the town holds its position along the slope, marking a place where departure became routine rather than remarkable. Cork rises from the River Lee, built across marsh and islands where bridges stitch the streets together. Orientation here feels earned. This complex geography mirrors a history shaped by difficult currents, where the city developed a habit of standing apart. That character hardened when fire swept through the center in 1920, leaving the commercial heart in ruins. The response defined the place. Rebuilding began before the ash had fully cooled, establishing a resilience grounded in action. In such an environment, identity served as a shield. The local insistence on being Corkonian comes from an era when allegiance determined safety and employment. Trust anchored itself in the immediate community because larger powers offered instability. Today, that legacy survives as an unyielding confidence. The city operates on its own rhythm, indifferent to outside approval. The river continues past the quays, moving the journey away from civic defiance and toward places where spiritual authority once cemented its power. Kinsale presents itself with immediate color. Streets curve down toward the harbor, lined with bright facades and kitchens that have earned the town a reputation for culinary excellence. The atmosphere suggests leisure, where masts sway gently in the marina and the daily rhythm follows the tide. It feels like a place designed for escape, offering a shelter where the primary concern is the quality of the catch. However, the road leading out to the old head of Kinsale reveals a vantage point over something heavier. The headland stretches into the Atlantic, ending in cliffs that drop sharply into the water. From here, the ocean appears vast and unmarked, yet it conceals the specific coordinates where the modern world changed course. Just 11 miles offshore, in May 1915, a German torpedo struck the RMS Lusitania. The sheer scale of the tragedy contrasts with the stillness of the view. The liner sank in 18 minutes, taking nearly 1,200 lives with it. People standing on this very coast watched the disaster unfold, witnessing a catastrophic moment that eventually pulled the United States into the First World War. A global shift in power pivoted on a patch of water visible from these cliffs. This proximity creates a strange paradox. A quiet fishing ground became the catalyst for international conflict. The history here is not buried in the earth, but dissolved in the sea, invisible to the casual glance. Today, golfers play on the edge of the headland, and fishing boats traverse the same currents. The ocean keeps its own counsel, absorbing the violence of the past without preserving a scar. It remains a beautiful, indifferent witness, holding the memory of the day the world turned on its axis just beyond the horizon. Leaving the coast, the journey moves inland, trading the unstable memory of water for the permanence of rock, where power once claimed the high ground in a different way. Long before the Great Pyramids rose from the sand, a massive ambition took shape here in the quiet fields of the Boyne Valley. Newgrange sits heavy on the earth, a circular mound of stone and turf that has dominated this landscape for 5,000 years. Its presence defies the standard timeline of history, standing as evidence of a culture that vanished before it could be named. The scale of this achievement lies in precision. The builders possessed a grasp of the cosmos that rivals modern astronomy, aligning the structure with absolute accuracy. They designed the central passage so that on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, a single beam of sunlight penetrates the darkness, illuminating the burial chamber deep within. This engineering captures time itself, proving that the people who lived here could read the sky as clearly as a map. Yet this mastery accompanies a profound silence. We know their calculations, but we do not know their language. This intricate vault served as a sanctuary strictly for the elite, a final resting place for the few, while the community that hauled the stones remained outside the walls. Newgrange stands as the earliest monument to a recurring theme. History preserves the power that directed the work, while the ordinary lives that made it possible have dissolved into the soil, leaving only the stone to speak for the civilization. The quiet stillness of the Boyne Valley disappears quickly as the route turns south, replaced by the gravitational pull of the capital. Dublin does not merely sit on the coast, it pulses with an energy that drives the entire island. Founded as a Viking trading post and later cemented as a garrison of foreign rule, the city eventually found its true voice through its writers, mapping these streets with words that traveled further than any army. Today, the River Liffey reflects a different kind of power. The historic brick skylines now share space with the aggressive verticality of the Silicon docks. In a short span of time, this small island has transformed into a command center for the global digital economy, hosting the European headquarters of tech giants that shape how the world communicates. Yet this sudden accumulation of wealth creates a complex reality. The gleaming facades imply a society that has solved its history, but the prosperity flows unevenly. Beneath the high-tech surface, the old city persists with its familiar struggles for space and identity. The glass towers reflect the sky, but they also cast long shadows over neighborhoods that have not fully shared in the boom, raising the question of whether this new fortune heals old fractures or simply conceals them behind a modern reflection. Despite the influx of global capital, the essential character of Dublin remains stubborn. The true pulse of the place still beats in the crowded pubs, the sharp wit of daily conversation, and the chaotic, unpolished energy of the streets. Money has successfully changed the skyline, but it has not rewritten the soul of the city. Dublin accepts the new wealth and wears the modern glass, yet it keeps its own counsel. Just south of the capital's modern energy, the road climbs into the Wicklow Mountains, entering a valley that seems to operate on a completely different frequency. This is Glendalough. In the 6th century, St. Kevin sought isolation here, finding a profound solitude between the steep cliffs and the dark waters of the two lakes. A monastic city eventually grew around his retreat, becoming a beacon of learning while much of Europe fell into darkness. Stone churches, weathered grave markers, and the iconic round tower stand together in a silence that feels intentional. The atmosphere here suggests a meaning far deeper than simple tranquility. While Irish history is often recognized for its loud rebellions and vocal resistance, this valley reveals the other necessary half of survival: the capacity for silence. For generations, endurance meant keeping knowledge safe and thoughts inward. The stone walls protected manuscripts, just as the people learned to protect their identity by holding it close, waiting out the storms of conquest and famine without breaking. The stillness here carries a heavy weight, serving as a reminder that resilience does not always require a shout. Sometimes, the most formidable power lies in the ability to remain absolutely still, preserving the truth until it is safe to speak again. The valley offers a kind of healing in this recognition. The silence allows the past to settle, validating the quiet patience that allowed a culture to outlast the forces trying to erase it. Island is a story written by two forces: the wave of millions who left and the bedrock of those who stayed. The land remembers both the sorrow of departure and the quiet strength of endurance. This journey ends here, but the world is full of other places defined by resilience. To see where the road leads next, join us for the journey ahead.